Everyone loves to talk about quarterbacks, especially where they rank in terms of NFL big boards and mock drafts. Every single year, there's seemingly a couple guys who come out of nowhere and become players who could go in the first round. Last year, we had guys like Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance, and the year before that, we had guys like Jordan Love and Joe Burrow. The list could go on, but my point being is that every single year, a player comes out of nowhere, or someone who didn't have a ton of hype all of a sudden gets all the hype in the world. In today's video, we're going to talk about a quarterback that I am super high on, and I think has a legitimate shot to be that dude for the 2022 NFL Draft. There's a lot of room for quarterbacks to move up, and there will definitely be some big time prospects who fall. As I just said earlier, we're going to talk about a guy that I am super high on, someone I think could potentially be a first round pick, and someone who could legitimately kind of be the next Joe Burrow because he was a transfer quarterback. So yeah, without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. I bet you're very curious about who we're going to talk about in today's video, and it is none other than Phil Jurkovec, a quarterback for Boston College. But who the heck is Jurkovec, and how did he get to this point? Before Phil Jurkovec went from South Bend, Indiana to Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, he grew up in western Pennsylvania. From a young age, for whatever reason, Phil favored Notre Dame. Maybe it was the gold helmets or the national spotlight, or the fact that his grandmother on his mother's side is 100% Irish. Who knows though? He was a big fan of Joe Montana, another western Pennsylvania native. At 10 years old, people knew he was going to be special, and he became a starting quarterback. He arrived at Pine Richland High School, and people had already heard of him. He was somewhat of a movie star before he ever took a snap on Pine Richland High School's varsity team, because back in 2014, a highlight film of Jurkovec playing on his school's 9th grade team generated more than 11,000 views on YouTube. Allegheny County is Pittsburgh Steelers country, and Jurkovec emerged as one of the most decorated high school quarterbacks in the region's rich football history. Jurkovec set a state record for single offensive yardage in passing, throwing, and receiving with 5,180 yards. He completed 24 of 334 passes for 3,964 yards and 39 touchdowns, and also rushed for over 1,200 yards on only 132 attempts, and would score 24 touchdowns. He was a big-time prospect, and when he was selected to play in the Army All-American game, it meant a lot to him to be in that moment. He said, quote, "My uncle was in the Marines, and I've had other family members who were in the military. That part of the game was really cool. It's an important aspect." In terms of recruiting, he was wanted by most schools, but a certain school had his heart from a young age. As I said earlier, Notre Dame was a dream school of his. There was a lot of great things about Notre Dame, he said. The school, how much they win, the culture of it, the players. There's a lot of good people there. But he also grew up in Pittsburgh, so naturally he was a Pitt Panthers fan and a Penn State fan, and Pat Narduzzi offered him when he was in 10th grade, but he would choose the Fighting Irish because of their brand name and winning culture. He also visited Penn State and Ohio State. He was regarded as one of the best quarterbacks in state history, and his ranking translated to a 24/7 Sports ranking of the number 4 pro-style quarterback, the number 83 player in the class of 2018, and a 4-star recruit, and at one point he was a 5-star kid. He had a lot of hype, and some people said he could come in and win the job as a true freshman. When he came into Notre Dame, he was highly anticipated, but not everything would go according to his plan. With Ian Book as the full-fledged starter at quarterback, Jurkovec was going to have to battle Brandon Wimbush for the backup job, and he was going to spend most of his time on the Pine. He appeared in 2 games as a freshman, and I mean this was expected. When Wimbush went off to UCF, he was now going to be the main backup. He appeared in his first game against New Mexico and would throw his first touchdown against Bowling Green. He threw a touchdown in their loss to Michigan and saw a total of 4 snaps in 3 games the rest of the year. With Ian Book back for his senior year, Phil had a decision to make and was also not very happy with how his Notre Dame career had been playing out so far. He said, quote, "Near the end at Notre Dame, I was really not liking football. I lost my love for it. I really did. I brought it up to my family about switching positions and not even playing quarterback. I wanted to make it work. I didn't want to be one of those guys when things got hard, they transferred and ran away with it." He ended up deciding to enter his name in the transfer portal after all though, and he settled on a school with coaches who had Pittsburgh ties. He chose to commit to Boston College, and with Jurkovec and Ohio State transfer Jalen Gill, new head coach Jeff Hafley was getting some new talent into the program. Jurkovec found himself in a Boston College program where he could play and develop in a pro-style offense. Hafley and offensive coordinator Frank Cignetti found Jurkovec to be a strong-arm quarterback with the tools to run the offense that they had planned to install in Chestnut Hill. Steve Adazio was the definition of average, and they needed something fun to make the program better, and that's why Jeff Hafley was brought in, who was a former Ohio State coach and is a bright young mind in the college game. Anthony Brown was the quarterback for the 2 years prior, but he grad transferred to Oregon where he lost a job to Tyler Shuck. Phil was on campus, but he would need a waiver to play immediately. The NCAA typically favors quarterbacks, as we all know, so he got one of course, and he was going to get a chance to start from the beginning. No one really knew what to expect from Jurkovec and Hafley, but so far they have proved the college football world wrong. No offense to Boston College, but outside of A.J. Dillon, the Eagles have been terribly boring over the past few years, and he's going to help make it a lot more fun. Phil had reliable backs in David Bailey and Travis Levi if he wanted to hand the ball off, and had 4 excellent targets in the receiving game. You first have emerging stars Zay Flowers, experienced veteran Kobe White, and ultra-athletic Ohio State transfer Jalen Gill to complete a 3-headed monster at wide receiver, but you cannot forget about tight end Hunter Long. The Eagles are not known to air the ball out, so it was going to be an entertaining year. In his first career start against Duke, he threw for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns and showed some of his true potential. Against number 12 North Carolina, he threw for another 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Boston College lost to North Carolina because they went for a 2-point conversion, and the Tar Heels brought the play all the way back. Against home state school Pitt, he had his coming out party. In an overtime win, Phil threw for 358 yards and 3 touchdowns and was starting to emerge as a young star in the ACC. He threw for 345 yards and 2 touchdowns, but Boston College lost in blowout fashion to Virginia Tech. He had a big game on the ground and through the air against Georgia Tech before a huge matchup with Clemson. With Trevor out, Jeff Hafley and the Eagles took advantage of it and reached unbelievable height as they had a double-digit lead on the Tigers going into halftime, but of course, as we all know, they blew it in the second half. Phil did get a chance to tie or win the game, but a safety resulted from it and they lost in a thrilling game. From there, they beat Syracuse in a close game, and most recently had a game against Notre Dame. In a homecoming game of sorts, he threw for 272 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they lost by 2 scores. Jurkovec would play in one final game in 2020, and it came against the Louisville Cardinals. It ended up winning 34-27, and he didn't exactly have the greatest game, as he didn't have a touchdown. Overall, he would finish his 2020 campaign with 2,558 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 5 picks. Those numbers are not ungodly by any means, or probably don't warrant first-round pick status, but when you're talking about Boston College football, those numbers are pretty dang good. So why am I so high on Jurkovec, and what do other people think? Well, The Athletic actually had a mock draft where they had Jurkovec going 15th overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers, so I am not alone in this regard. There are also multiple blog posts and sites that say Jurkovec could be a first-round pick or a sleeper in the 2022 NFL Draft. So why exactly is everyone so high on the dude? Well, he's in a pro-style offense, and although a ton of schools have switched to that format, it's still a big deal, and he'll be doing things on a day-to-day basis that could help him translate to the NFL better than other players. He already has great numbers as well. In only 10 games, he threw for over 2,500 yards and showed that he had great decision making. He led multiple game-winning drives and showed the trait that a lot of franchises are after: the it factor. They want a guy who can win games and make plays in key moments. He's also 6'5" and 225 pounds, so he definitely has the size and height to be an NFL quarterback, and despite being that tall, he is surprisingly agile and is great at avoiding tackles. According to some scouts, they compare him to Steelers quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, and it'd be pretty funny if he ended up replacing him. If Jurkovec takes that next step in 2021 and continues to improve his decision making, he could easily be a first-round pick and a guy that climbs up draft boards. I think Boston College needs to have a pretty big year, and he needs to throw for over 3,500 yards and probably between 25 to 35 touchdowns. As I just said, he also needs to win some games for Boston College, so they need to have a good record and get to a decent bowl game. He is a go-to weapon in Zay Flowers, who will be one of the best wide receivers in the country in 2021, and Jeff Hafley has brought a new offensive style to Chestnut Hill that is going to favor the passing attack. Overall, I'm super excited for what Jurkovec brings to the table, and he is one of my favorite players going into the 2021 season. I've loved the resurgence of Boston College football under Hafley, and Phil has made it that much better. It goes to show you how important the transfer portal is, as he was a guy who was stuck behind Ian Book for quite a while, but since he has gone to a new school, he has finally been able to showcase his talent. It reminds me of the Joe Burrow situation, because he was buried on the depth chart at Ohio State to a quarterback who really didn't have a lot of NFL potential in JT Barrett, and then he would go on and shine at LSU. Like Burrow, Jurkovec was stuck behind Ian Book, who's a guy who does not have a ton of NFL potential, and now he could go shine at Boston College and become a first-round pick. I really hope it happens, and I'm really curious to see how it all pans out. Let me know what you think, though. Is Phil Jurkovec a first-round pick? Who's another sleeper quarterback for the 2022 NFL Draft? And who is your favorite quarterback for the 2022 NFL Draft? Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, subscribe if you love college football, give the video a like if you want to support today's video, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about another quarterback who's trending, Carson Strong. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.